Yo, what's going on, guys? Seth Spartan here, nutrition, training, and hormone expert and Prometheus Pro bodybuilder with Prometheus HRT, the world's best testosterone and hormone replacement clinic. Use my code SPARTAN to save on either testosterone or HGH replacement therapy or peptides or Anavar, Anadrol, and the list goes on as long as you qualify. Guys, without any further ado, this is Hexarelin unleashed like you've never heard it before. Guys, we're going to go through all the pros, unbiased, uncensored, absolutely everything you need to know. Then we're going to jump on over into the cons. Again, unbiased, uncensored, absolutely everything you could ever want or need to know. From there, we're going to go down and talk about dosage. We will talk about dosage of Hexarelin, what is preferred, what is safe, and the such. Then we're going to finish up with any extra additional information that people just plain and simple are not talking about, or they just don't know in the first place. So guys, this is Hexarelin unleashed like you've never heard before. Buckle up, it's going to be a fun ride. Here we go. Starting in the pros, Hexarelin. Hexarelin is a powerful GHRP. What does this mean in the first place? Any GHRP is a growth hormone releasing peptide. Hexarelin also fits into this class, same as GHRP6, GHRP2, ipamorelin, and then Hexarelin, which we are talking about. So growth hormone releasing peptide, that is what it is in general, and it is a powerful one at that. We're going to get into just how powerful this crazy peptide is in just a second, so stay with us. Moving on, Hexarelin is a ghrelin mimic. What does this mean? GHRPs by nature are also ghrelin mimics. Guys, what is ghrelin? I have to explain this because not everybody knows what ghrelin is. In the same way, guys, testosterone would be the root of an anabolic steroid. Think about this. Testosterone is the base androgen, the base anabolic hormone in the human body. Every single anabolic steroid comes from testosterone in some way or another. So if you have a tree, or I guess we'll start on the bottom because the tree goes upward. So anyways, you have testosterone at the base, right? From there, it goes up and it breaks off into, you have DHT derivatives, 19-nors, and every single other anabolic steroid all comes from testosterone originally, right? In the same way, every single GHRP, growth hormone releasing peptide, whether it's GHRP6, GHRP2, Hexarelin, ipamorelin, in the same way, they all come from ghrelin, all right? So instead of testosterone branching out into every single other anabolic steroid, which man has created off of testosterone, again, being the original source, ghrelin fits being the base for every other growth hormone releasing peptide. Hopefully I explained that well. Moving on from that. Oh, ghrelin. I have to explain what it is in the first place. Ghrelin, guys, what is ghrelin? Ghrelin is your body's natural hormone, which is produced and secreted by the cells of the stomach after you have been fasted or the stomach has been emptied for a period of time. Great example. Think when you wake up in the middle of the night starving, maybe you didn't eat enough the day before, but you wake up in the middle of the night and your stomach is wrenching, you're hungry, it hits you, wakes you up, right? That is ghrelin affecting your brain and saying, what? We are hungry, we need food. And that's the same hormone which releases lots of human growth hormones. So in a nutshell, what is ghrelin? Released by the stomach after it's been emptied for some period of time. The ghrelin then travels to the pituitary gland, hits the pituitary gland, attaches onto those receptor sites, and does what? Releases growth hormone, because you've been fasted, releases growth hormone, travels to the fat tissue, breaks down fat, supplies the body with food while you are fasted. Having said that, ghrelin also does things like causes lethargy, hunger. It can also impair fat loss because you're tripping your body's starvation mechanism, and we will get into that, talking about that, comparing Hexarelin with other peptides in just a little bit. But bottom line, guys, that's what ghrelin is, and obviously Hexarelin being a GHRP is a ghrelin mimic. Moving on to the pros. Half-life. Hexarelin has a 70-minute half-life. However, this is intravenously. Now, no person that I know is going to take Hexarelin intravenously. I looked all over and I have had trouble finding a sub-Q half-life for Hexarelin. But do not doubt, do not fear, because we can theorize the half-life sub-Q off of the proven intravenous half-life. So half-life, taken intravenously, Hexarelin is 70 minutes. We know that sub-Q, it's going to be, give or take, triple, all right? So we can theorize that that means taken sub-Q, like pretty much every person would take for performance or HGH replacement or whatever, the half-life is going to be somewhere between 3, 4, and 5 hours. I'd put my money around 4 hours with Hexarelin. You can check me on this. You can look this stuff up because there's a lot of bad information in general regarding the half-life of Hexarelin. People say half-life is 60, 70 minutes. Well, that's true, but nobody's going to take it intravenously, and that's the only half-life that I have seen available is the intravenous one. So sub-Q, this is really going to be 3 or 4 hours. Have to debunk some misinformation here because people just copy and paste and they don't look at whether this was taken intravenous, sub-Q, or intramuscular. So anyways, guys, moving on to the pros. And one thing I want to compare here, with a longer half-life, somewhere between 3 and 5 hours, this is going to make Hexarelin a much longer, guys, longer acting peptide on the pituitary gland, much like what? MK677, which is misclassified as a SARM, but regardless, it is a secretagogue, much like Hexarelin or any of the GHRPs. In fact, in medical research, and you can go watch my GHRP6 video or MK6 video if you have any questions on this, but in medical scientific studies, the scientists determined that there is no difference between the function of GHRP6 and MK in studies when talking about the action on the pituitary gland. So, you know, MK, even though it's a completely different molecule, it acts almost exactly the same or indistinguishable. That's how they worded it in their studies. MK and GHRP6 in terms of mechanism of action, even though one's taken orally, one's an injectable peptide. Having said that, that longer half-life is going to give a lot more, much longer effect. You would think, but you do get a longer effect with Hexarelin, but it's going to be much bigger. We're going to get into why in just a second. Hang on. Moving on to the pros. Has to be stated, Hexarelin, guys, is a 3rd or 4th class what? GHRP, growth hormone releasing peptide. We have 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and the list goes on. Classes. Think about, let's go back to anabolic steroids for a second. You have different tries or multiple attempts at making specific anabolic steroids. You know, you have DHT to Anavar to Anadrol. You have methylated steroids. You have halotestin. You have older ones. You have younger ones. And the bottom line is this, guys. Usually, the more tried, the more narrowed down, and really, ultimately, the later class or later generation of drugs, hormones, steroids, whatever we're talking about, is usually better. Why? More tries means better. Scientists are able to hone in the chemical structure to do what they want better. And guys, this has never been the case more with Hexarelin. GHRP6 does what it's needed, all right? It does what's needed. Big growth hormone release, but the effects are too close to normal ghrelin. You get too much of the nasty side effects with GHRP6, such as insane hunger, lethargy, makes you tired, and fat storage, okay? You get problems with GHRP6. GHRP2, the next attempt, even better. You get an even bigger spike, slightly shorter half-life, but with GHRP2, you still have an impairment of fat loss, not as much, but you still have an impairment of fat loss, you still have lethargy, and you still trip that starvation. Well, guess what? Next comes along Hexarelin, and they got away from that pretty much completely, okay? Arguably completely. So with Hexarelin and Ipamorelin, these much more advanced, farther along growth hormone releasing peptides, what do we see? It doesn't trip the fat loss mechanism pretty much at all in both cases of Hexarelin and Ipamorelin. So that means that what? These later classes of peptides, not only are they much more powerful in terms of growth hormone release to cons, but they're just more effective, more efficient in general. Think later classes of anabolic steroids. You want to compare, for example, one of the earliest steroids. Compare halotestin to Anavar. it is day and night. Same thing with growth hormone releasing peptides. Moving on to the pros. This has to be talked about. We're going to give credit where credit's due. This has to be said, all right? Hexarelin, the peptide hexarelin, gives a huge pulse of HGH, human growth hormone. And by huge, I mean insane, okay? Compared to GHRP6, GHRP2, and even the well-loved and amazing peptide ipamorelin, which is very advanced, by the way, that's what I use. In comparison, hexarelin blows them out of the water. It nukes it, okay? So with hexarelin, huge pulse of HGH, and to describe it, I would say insane, okay? You are like dropping all of the growth hormone from your pituitary. It is a nuke size HGH release, and it can be very intense. We'll get into this in safety studies, you know, people turning red, dizzy, things like that. It is, you know, hexarelin extremely safe to use, okay? Safe to use, but obviously there are some people that had negative side effects, non-serious side effects, guys, such as, you know, red face, you know, they're kind of dizzy, disorientated because of the dosage of hexarelin and that huge output of HGH. We'll get into that in a little bit. But that has to be said, huge pulse of HGH, and it is insane when compared to every other growth hormone releaser in the world. Moving on to the pros. Pulse pattern. We got to talk about pulse pattern and compare them real quick. What is the pulse pattern of the peptide hexarelin? The pulse pattern is this. It's a single pulse, it's long, and it is huge. We're talking a nuclear-sized pulse. Now, this is how it typically works, guys. The half-lives, whether it's GHRP6, GHRP2, ipamorelin, hexarelin, they all have differing half-lives, and even MK677. Let's throw that in the mix. You know, we have GHRP6. It's a single pulse. It's more like this, because the half-life GHRP2 is like this, like GHRP6, except it's going to go much higher and it's going to be a little bit shorter. So GHRP6, GHRP2, what's next? Ipamorelin. Let's throw ipamorelin. Ipamorelin is not going to be like these, longer half-life. It's going to give you more of a shield volcano pulse, okay? And then from there, let's have hexarelin step up to the plate. Hexarelin is going to do something like this. Okay, it's going to be a massive growth hormone spike, much higher than GHRP2, much longer. It's just like, again, dropping the nuke, which has some problems because you can only use this 2 or 3 times a week, 3 times being max, okay? That's how much desensitization this wreaks on the pituitary. So we'll get into that in a second. Having said that, let's compare it to MK real quick. MK, because of its long mechanism of action, does both. Both being what? Stimulates a big pulse. You get a big pulse, boom. But then also when it wears off, it will still stimulate, even when it's wearing off, it'll still stimulate your body's natural pulses. I presume that hexarelin's longer half-life is going to do something similar, but I don't have the medical data to back it up. So, you know, my bro science answer based on the information I have is that hexarelin is going to boost natural pulses a little bit like MK, but this really does not matter hardly at all when compared to the wicked pulse that you're getting with hexarelin. And guys, please, if you're, you know, I know hexarelin, I have to check. I don't know outside of the U.S., but I know in the U.S. hexarelin is legal to buy, legal to possess. So if you use this peptide, be extremely careful. All right. Let's see here. Moving on to the pros. This pulse, we talked about the pulse pattern. We talked about, you know, just how powerful it is. We got to talk about this. It has to be said. Hexarelin is going to give you a huge increase in what? HGH, IGF-1, muscle mass, and fat burning effect as well, much more than any other peptide. Period. Milligram per milligram. If we are comparing a single, if we are comparing a single dose, milligram per milligram, microgram per microgram, if we are comparing a single dose, GHRP6, GHRP2, ipamorelin, hexarelin, to each other, you're going to get the biggest most powerful HGH, IGF-1 increase, muscle mass increase, and also fat burning effect with Hexarelin, period. All right? I'm going to explain why later on, why I still pick Ipamorelin over Hexarelin, because if we're saying if we wanted to get the biggest bang in a week instead of a single pulse, Ipamorelin, why you can use it almost every day when compared to Hexarelin. Hexarelin, after your body's basically shot its, after Hexarelin has basically run its course, had its explosion pulse, it takes a long time to reset. And by a long time, I mean days. We are talking 48 hours minimum. So we'll get into that in a second. Let's talk about, and guys with fat loss, go watch my GHRP6 video or GHRP2 video. But, the thing is that GHRP6, GHRP2, you get HGH, IGF-1 muscle mass, but GHRP6 and GHRP2 fall flat in the fat loss department. GHRP6, no fat loss. GHRP2, a little bit, but still impaired because of acting like too much like your body's natural ghrelin. Moving on. Okay, we're still in the pros with Hexarelin. Unbelievable. Let's finish this out. Hexarelin has to be said. Giving credit again where credit's due. Hexarelin is the best. It is the GOAT when compared to every other growth hormone releasing peptide. Again, except if you are using it almost every day. All right? Has to be said. But the thing is, guys, is that let's take Hexarelin and Ipamorelin. We can put them in the same camp here real quick. Why is Hexarelin the GOAT? We could argue, weekly. Why would Ipamorelin be the GOAT? Both Hexarelin and Ipamorelin. Fat loss, lethargy, hunger, tripping that starvation mechanism we talked about from being too close to ghrelin. All of those are gone, pretty much non-existent with them. It's still a little bit possible, but HGH release and all the effects we talked about versus, to tripping, hunger, lethargy, that starvation mechanism, it's pretty much, everything's been pretty much removed from both Hexarelin and Ipamorelin, okay? It's not worth, it's Hexarelin and Ipamorelin are the two kings, okay? It just depends on which one you want to use more often. That's it, guys. I'm Seth Spartan. We're done with the pros. Moving into the cons now. Here we go. Cons with Hexarelin. Well, there's not a long laundry list like there was before. We only have four pros. We only have four cons. Con number one with Hexarelin, and this is the biggest con, arguably. Pay attention, high desensitization rate. With Hexarelin, you have the highest desensitization rate out of any other GHRP, all right? Period. I already talked on this a little bit. Hexarelin is so powerful, both half-life and effect on the pituitary, which is a good thing for growth hormone release. We'll say this is a good thing for infrequent growth hormone release. It's a good thing. But in terms of desensitization, you're going to need 48 hours between doses. So in terms of at minimum, if you're taking even more than, 200 micrograms, 250, you could say that you need more than that. You need 3 days to resensitize because of how powerful it is. So high desensitization rate with Hexarelin, this is the biggest drawback. Moving on to the cons. Carb and blood sugar effect. Now, this is with every single GHRP. I don't know one that's able to get around this. When trying to use these peptides for HGH boost, what's the issue? If you have higher blood sugar from carbs, from whatever else, if you have higher blood sugar at the time of usage, guess what? You're going to have less growth hormone release. Why? Because it's that higher blood sugar is affecting negative feedback loop on HGH, okay? Bottom line. So the thing is that, can you eat? I hear people saying you can't eat. You can't eat before taking Hexarelin. You can't eat, Guys, here's the bottom line. You can eat, you just can't do what? Eat tons of carbs and also tons of fat for that matter, all right? You can have, you can have a couple eggs. You can have, some lean steak. You can, and in fact, guys, I would argue based on what we know in the human body, if you have a protein shake alongside with, I'm saying no sugar or anything like that, you can have a protein shake or some lean steak or something, alongside hexarelin, ipamorelin, GHRP2, GHRP6, and it would even theoretically boost HGH levels even higher, because when you eat high amounts of protein, amino acids rise in the bloodstream, that normally triggers HGH. So the thing is that yes, absolutely, you can eat with these peptides. Even, the doctors at Prometheus HRT, I would fight with them about this. I'd say, hey, we know that high amounts of carbs and blood sugar and also fats to some extent can lower the pulse, how much growth hormone is released. But hey, we know that just taking in protein alone, when amino acids rise, this increases HGH release. So yes, you can eat. You don't have to fast with these hormones, all right? You can eat with these hormones. Just depends on what you eat. Moving on. All right, no boost to natural pulses. Now this is almost laughable. All right, like I said, I theorized that you would actually get some boost, maybe a slight boost to natural pulses because of the long half-life. But here's why this doesn't matter, guys. We are comparing, again, apples to oranges. When we talk about GHRP6, GHRP2, ipamorelin, hexarelin, these are growth hormone releasing peptides, not to be compared to GHRHs, growth hormone releasing hormones, such as Hexarelin, CJC DAC, CJC no DAC, okay? These boost pulses, well, these stimulate pulses. Now, both increase HGH, period. We already talked about that. And go watch my video. Go watch my video talking about my current cycle, or my cycle for the Tom Platz record. Go watch that video. I explain very well, the synergy between growth hormone releasing peptides and growth hormone releasing hormones, okay, such as CJC, DAC, no DAC. I talk about that, okay, being basically, CJC is basically CJC, no DAC, growth. So growth hormone releasing hormones such as CJC, DAC or no DAC, they basically take the lock or take the governor off of the pituitary gland, much like a car. You take the governor off and you can use the pituitary at its maximum. Go watch that video anyways, guys. I explain some other things too. Moving on. Oh, I didn't finish my other point. There's no boost to natural pulses. Why this doesn't really matter. Well, you might get some boost because, again, the longer half-life, but why doesn't this matter? Here's the bottom line, guys. This doesn't matter because the crazy, insane nuclear pulse that you get from Hexarelin, it doesn't matter that it doesn't boost natural pulses like MK. It just doesn't matter, plain and simple, okay? Okay, if your growth hormone level goes to 200, does it matter if you boosted a couple small natural pulses? No, it doesn't. It really doesn't. So that point is null and void. Cortisol and prolactin. Let's talk about that quick, guys. Cortisol and prolactin. Are you going to get some cortisol and prolactin increases with Hexarelin? Yes. Are they going to be significant? The short answer is no, unless you are using this at high dosages. And even then, the growth hormone release to the cortisol and prolactin is really not significant when compared to the HGH release. So GHRP6, GHRP2, these are the worst offenders with cortisol and prolactin. Again, think you're tripping that body starvation mechanism, all right? With ipamorelin and hexarelin, they pretty much removed it, all right, completely. But you can still get cortisol and prolactin with both ipamorelin and hexarelin if you crank the doses high enough. That's just plain and simple how it works, okay? Why? Because there's still growth hormone releasing peptides based off of ghrelin, all right? Based off of your body's natural ghrelin. And guys, that is it for the cons. Covered the pros, covered the cons. Here we go. Let's move into dosing. Dosages with Hexarelin. Here's my professional recommendation. Okay. Let's try this first. Try this again. Check with your doctor before you do anything. Having said that, this is my professional recommendation. 100 to 200 micrograms of Hexarelin per dosage. You can go up to 250 if you're over 200 pounds and you're used to the effects. Red face, flushing, you know, you're going to feel this nuclear HGH pulse is what I'm trying to tell you. So if you're, I wouldn't go above 200 micrograms, but if you're a larger individual, you can you can do 250 if you want, but I absolutely would not go over 250. This is just such a powerful compound. I wouldn't even go over 200. That's going to be a huge, whopping effect on the pituitary gland. So 250, you could do it if you're larger. Do I recommend it? Absolutely not. You can still do it, but the bottom line is that you can take more, but at some point your head's just going to feel like it's going to pop off, and you can keep going up. You'll get some more of these uncomfortable sides, but at some point your body's just not going to release any more growth hormone. So I would say the cap being about 200 micrograms. Having said that, let's talk about dosage frequency. 2 to 3 times per week, 3 times being the absolute max. All right, if you're doing 250 micrograms per shot of pure Hexarelin, you do twice a week. 3 times might even be too much. We talked about desensitization already at length with these hormones. So 2 to 3 times per week, and that would be 3 times would be the max, just because of how powerful, again, the desensitization rate is with Hexarelin. Guys, that's it for dosage. Let's move into any extra additional information, and then guess what? We are out of here. Extra. More is not always better with Hexarelin, okay? I explained this over the course of the video, so I don't really think I need to stay on this, but more is not better. Higher frequency is not better. Higher dosage is not always better. And guys, here's another point. The higher the dosage of whatever peptide you're using every day, whether it's Hexarelin, Ipamorelin, GHRP6, GHRP2, the higher dosage, guys, the longer you have to wait before you get to use that again. I see these insane gurus talking about dosing some of these peptides multiple times a day. Guys, you're going to have no growth hormone release if you do that, okay? You're not injecting just straight HGH. You're injecting something that's tripping your pituitary to release big pulses of HGH. So if you inject something, let's take Hexarelin. Can you inject this multiple times a day? Absolutely not. And I see people advising to inject it multiple times a day. That's not going to work. It's not going to work at all. And you can get your HGH levels tested to confirm this. And then I see people saying you can inject GHRP2, GHRP6, or Ipamorelin multiple times a day. Guys, the half-life's too long. You still have to allow some time for resensitization. It's not going to work. The pulses are going to look like this compared to the first ones. It makes me want to rip my hair out. All right, so more is not better. And if you don't believe what I'm saying, then you can please test the multiple day per use. I laid all this stuff out. With Ipamorelin, you can dose it at max 5 times per week. Take Monday and Thursday off. With Hexarelin, 2 to 3 times a week. Depending on dosage and such and so forth. But the thing is that if you try to dose these peptides multiple times a day, no matter what they are, even GHRP2, which has the shortest half-life, you're still going to have some problems, all right? You're still going to have some problems in terms of those pulses are going to be so small. It's better off just waiting and going back to, if you're using GHRP2, 6, GHRP6, GHRP2, Ipamorelin, 5 times a week max. And just use them at, 200 micrograms. And watch my videos on that, all right? Oh, man, there's so much bad information. Why I still prefer Ipamorelin. Yeah, I needed to get into this. We talked about Hexarelin. Why do I still pick Ipamorelin over Hexarelin at the end of the day? Well, guys, here's the truth. I could go either. I would either do, it's almost a coin toss between Hexarelin 2 or 3 times a week versus Ipamorelin 5 times a week. And that's what my doctors have told me to do. Ipamorelin 5 times a week, Monday, Thursday off for maximum growth hormone release to resensitize completely. Go watch again my my full cycle breaking the Tom Platz record, okay, for that series. But the reason that I'm going to pick Ipamorelin over Hexarelin, I can dose it more often. So I'm getting more, think about it this way. I can use Hexarelin 3 times a week tops and get these mad spikes, right? What's the problem though? Am I training only 3 times a week? No, I'm training usually 5 or 6 times a week. So what does this mean? I would rather be able to use that compound, use Hexarelin every day to boost not just HGH and IGF-1, but boost muscle building, fat loss, and primarily muscle building and recovery in those muscle groups I just worked after my workout, versus only being able to do that every other day. So I'm getting smaller pulses, but I'm getting them, I can get them every day after or before training. In my case, probably after would be better for building muscle. And I wouldn't be able to do that otherwise, all right? So that's the big bottom line with Hexarelin. So that's why, it's better if both are great, guys. But in terms of if you're a hard training bodybuilder or athlete, guys, it's going to be better to be able to dose something pretty much every day, smaller releases, than to use Hexarelin and only be able to do it every other day and not be able to get this big HGH pulse, not getting an HGH pulse every single day, as would be the case with Hexarelin. Guys, I'm Seth Spartan. This is Hexarelin Unleashed. It's been a pleasure. Do everything safely, legally, and through your doctor. And guys, I guess that's pretty much everything you need to know. I'm Seth Spartan. Stay safe, stay healthy, and we are out of here.